Welcome to the ReaderHouse Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm your host, Corey Graham. Join us here every Friday night at 8 p.m. or listen anytime via podcast at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, to name just a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where the independent new authors come first. The book I'm holding now explores some really interesting ideas, and when you hear the title, you'll see why. It's titled Hidden Stories of Jesus in Britain, and the co-authors are the mother-son team of Ben, Bron, and Pam Kimball, and I'm really happy that Pam and Bron are here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. We get to talk all about this book. Pam, Bron, welcome to the show. I really appreciate you both being here tonight.
Thank you. We're happy to be here.
Well, I'm happy to be talking with you. And like I said, I think this is a really interesting idea, Hidden Stories of Jesus in Britain. So, Pam, can you tell me all about this and what readers will find?
The book is about surprising evidence, as you indicate, that actually exists that Jesus Christ visited the British Isles in his lifetime. It would have been during the years that the Bible doesn't record anything about him. Sometime after he was 12 and before he began his ministry around the age of 30. And we explore in this book why he might have gone there, how he could have gone there, and what the evidence is that he actually did. It's not positive proof, but it is interesting and compelling narrative, in our opinion. Pretty well supported by legend and ancient documents that are both religious and secular.
So was it primarily a Christian audience, then, that you think you were going for here?
I think that people who have some knowledge and belief in the Bible will be more interested in it, yes.
I'm really interested to hear how this came about. Can you tell me the backstory to all this?
So I was part of a Facebook group back in 2019. This was a group of people of faith, believers who shared their thoughts and feelings about Jesus Christ in posts. I was made aware that there was an interest in a little book that my brother-in-law had written about apocalyptic writings about the childhood of Jesus. And the administrator posted one day on this group that he'd read this little book and thought it was interesting, and did anyone else familiar with it? No one else was familiar with it. Some were intrigued and tried to find the book and had a hard time doing so. The author had been my brother-in-law. Besides that book, he had produced a number of audio recordings on ancient manuscripts, particularly on religious topics. That was his life passion. But he was deceased, and it was all out of print, and no one with rights to the material was willing to reproduce it at that time. However, my husband had a collection of all of the CDs that his brother had ever made. So we got up the CDs, couldn't really listen to them, and this is where Bron came in, because he knew how to digitize most of them for our personal use. And in doing so, he also became interested in these religious, historical topics, along with our other son, Ben. I think it was Ben's idea first to write our own little book. We were particularly intrigued by all things connected to the Celtic people and Jesus Christ, as that was my ancestry.
So my uncle, my mom's brother-in-law, Glenn Kimball, was really famous back in the 2000s on shows like Coast to Coast and things. He would bring in millions of listeners to hear him talk about these ancient manuscripts, particularly Christian or religious ancient manuscripts. And I was building an interest, like, what on earth was my uncle doing? I was a teenager at the time when he was writing his fame. And I had recently started getting some interest in it. At the same time, this post happens with my mom. At the same time, my brother Ben's kind of sparking this idea of maybe we should bring back some of that research that we are sitting on. Like my mom said, my uncle Glenn had passed away in 2010. And here's people on Facebook hungry, asking for, more information from this guy who they just had this little book about. And a lot of them had even remembered some of his interviews on the radio and things like that. And so that's kind of where it came together. My brother Ben tossed around the idea of maybe we should start doing the research ourselves and pick up where that research left off and write a book. We made it happen. It took us about three and a half years or so.
Well, I would say more like 2 to get it written and then another year to get it published.
Research before then, too. Me and Ben were already deep into it.
Do either of you have a writing background? Have you done anything like this before?
This is our first book.
She's been the key to editing all the stuff me and my brother kind of plopped down on paper or whatever. we feel like we're pretty good storytellers, but we got two different voices going on, and we got a third author, and my mom's written a lot of it too, and so she's been the key to making it all fit together, make it cohesive, make the grammar work, all that kind of important stuff.
Again, it's titled Hidden Stories of Jesus in Britain. It's written by Ben, Bron, and Pam Kimball, and it's published by Covenant Books. So, of course, you can find it everywhere. Head over to Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes, even traditional brick-and-mortar stores, and you'll be able to pick this up. Bron, Pam, it's been really wonderful talking with you and learning all about this. It's fascinating. Thanks again for joining me.
Thank you for giving us this opportunity.
Yes, thank you very much.
I'm looking at a new book that sheds light on the struggles and triumphs of Black Americans who served in the Marines. It's written by Lieutenant Colonel David B. Brown, and it's titled Shoulders to Stand On, Marine Corps Heroes from 1942. I'm going to learn more about this book. The author, David, is here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. David, welcome to the show. I appreciate you joining me tonight.
Thank you, Corey. I'm here and ready to go. What do you got?
Well, I'm just really curious about Shoulders to Stand On and what you wrote about, what readers can find here, David. So can you tell me all about it?
I call it Shoulders to Stand On Marine Corps Heroes from 1942, but I refer to it as Shoulders. And you know, I've served 22 years active duty in the Marine Corps, and then I've been with the Marine Corps almost all my life since then, and that's a good 40-some years. But Shoulders takes a historic look at racism in the Marine Corps. I have several very prominent friends who are Black Marines, and so I got to know them, and their story needed to be told. I thought, this is my fifth book, so it was pretty easy. I had a pattern of how to write these books and things, but it focuses on a male and female Black American Marines from World War II on to today. And they successfully overcame, different racial challenges that they encountered either in their youth or during active duty, and some of them in war, World War II, and some later on in Korea and all that. They rise to become general officers, U.S. ambassadors, the head of NASA, and the co-writer of the U.S. Fair Housing Act of 1968. These are really heroes. I mean, I went through the Marine Corps for 22 active duty years, and I never encountered anything like they encountered. They have done that, and then they rose either in the Marine Corps or later on as ambassadors, after they got out, to be American heroes. They are. That's what the book's about, Corey. There's 18 of them. There are 2 women, so 16 men. They go from the time when our first boot camp, if you will, for the blacks was segregated, if you can believe that. And then after 1949, they then went to our training, Paris Island, like the rest of the Marines. So the younger guys who became successful, 3-star generals and all that, they truly said several times, hey, we stood on their shoulders. Honest to God, we could have made it without that. That's what the book's about. Great men accomplishing great things.
What sorts of readers do you think would be really into this, David?
Well, of course, Marines would be interested. I initially thought I might be writing it for the Marine Corps Education Department, but it wasn't footnoted like they wanted it done and didn't have enough references and things for an academic world. I launched it that way, and the Marine Corps definitely would need it because it has to do with a lot of leadership. But it would also open itself up to other services where they have issues coming up, and they could be racial or not only blacks, but the Orientals and Spanish and things like that. And I think the civilian world would get a lot out of it, too, because there's always this bright, shiny penny who's struggling to get promoted, and the organization suffers because he's not doing what he's capable of doing. So in that regard, that's what we're trying to achieve there.
What does your writing background look like, David? Have you ever done anything like this before?
I have, in a sense. This is my fifth book. It's all about the Marine Corps, so I'm 2 feet on the ground solid. The previous book I wrote was done and published in 2020, and it was about the Beirut bombing, and that happened in 1983. But I started using character development when they were kids and how their parents affected them at that time, and then how they matriculated through the Marine Corps on into Beirut. And I used that pattern for developing these 18 heroes in my book. And I was very interested in knowing what was it like when they were born, what do they remember, and all that kind of information. And then I take them from that standpoint. Here's a person who's either a tough guy or maybe he's been picked on and stuff like that, and he has to work his way around that. So how they then use that kind of thought patterns, cultural maneuvers, if I could say, how they use that in the Marine Corps where they encounter some difficulties, and it's changed now. We have a very healthy ethnic environment in the Marine Corps.
Well, what an important book this is. Again, it's titled Shoulders to Stand On, Marine Corps Heroes from 1942. This is written by Lieutenant Colonel David B. Brown, and it's published by Newman Springs Publishing. So, of course, you can find it everywhere. Head on over to Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes, also traditional brick-and-mortar stores, and you'll be able to find it. Well, David, it's been really wonderful talking with you tonight and learning all about this book. Thanks again for joining me.
All right, Corey, thank you for giving me a call. I appreciate it.
We're going to be talking about a book right now that's a tale of family, loyalty, a love of horses, and the true meaning of perfection. The name of the book is Who Needs Girls? Book 1, and this is written by Jolene Lewis. So we're going to be talking all about this. Jolene is here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. Jolene, welcome. I appreciate you being here with me.
Well, I'm delighted to be here.
Well, I'm delighted to have you, and I'm curious about Who Needs Girls? Book 1. Jolene, can you tell me about it?
Yes, I spent my career as a high school English teacher and college teacher. But I found that at the high school level and even college level, that many kids, especially young men, didn't really like to read. And I thought it needed to go back to the basics down in the elementary. And so I decided to write a story that would grip these young men and make them lifelong readers. And that was my intent.
When it comes to being published, is this your first time or have you done it before?
Well, actually, we published the book in 2008, and it did really well. But I was with a very small publisher in Texas, and when the orders started coming in, she couldn't keep up. And so she encouraged me to find a bigger publisher. And I was busy teaching and having a family, and I just put it away for a while. And I've since retired, and so I thought I might give it another try.
Once you handed this manuscript off to the publisher, Jolene, was this a really long publishing process?
Well, actually, the first time was not, because I was not even aware of it. My daughters and children got together and did it secretly. It was very funny because we met for a family luncheon, and since we all live in different locations, and so we came together, and I was told it was for one reason. And when I got there, my older daughter handed me the book, and she was a librarian. And so she was always finding neat books for me to look at. And so she handed it to me, and I looked at it, and I said, "Oh, we're going to have a new baby." And she said, "No, Mother." She said, "Look at it." Because I didn't recognize the title because I had changed the title numerous times. And so she said, "Now look at it." And I said, "Where did you find a book with my name on it?" And she said, "Mother," and because I had no clue it was being published. So, but the second time around, this is the second time around. And so we've learned patience. We're just letting it go wherever God takes it. So we'll see.
I'm looking at it right now, looking at the cover. I love the illustrations here. Can you tell me about the illustrations?
Well, that's my oldest daughter. She is a veterinarian's wife, and she's always loved horses. And so when I wrote the book, she did the illustrations. I enjoy the illustrations as much as the story, actually, because I know who did them,
Oh, I love it. Once you handed this off to the publisher, what was the most challenging part of the publishing process for you?
The most recent is just being patient and letting things work out. Well, I always stayed away from the publishing world because I would read and it would say, well, a year and a half. And I thought, I don't have that kind of patience to wait that long. But, it teaches you patience because each step has to be taken very carefully. And I'm very thankful that Covenant has taken the book and done what they've done with it. So,
what are the chances we're going to see another book from you in the future?
Well, and that's why we put the book 1. Book 2 is ready to go. Book 3 is about a little over halfway written.
Well, this sounds like a book that children are really going to love. Again, it's titled Who Needs Girls? Book 1. It's written by Jolene Lewis and published by Covenant Books, so you can find it everywhere, like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Jolene, it's been so wonderful talking with you tonight. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
Author T. Harper Wilkinson's new book, 'Twas in Dixie, is an historical fiction novel that takes place in the Old South during the Civil War. And I get to find out all about this book. I'm speaking with the author, Harper, here right now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. Harper, welcome to the show. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
I'm really excited to learn about 'Twas in Dixie, so can you tell me all about this, Harper? What are readers going to find when they open it up?
Well, it's about the Old South. It's about the people in the Old South. The book is actually about 2,000 pages long, but because it was so long, we divided it into 7 books. So this is actually the first book of 7. It is a complete story, and I would consider it an adventure. But each section is a story in itself, and this is the first.
Well, that's wonderful. So you're thinking fans of adventure stories and that kind of thing would be most into this?
I think so. Well, it's about people, too.
When it comes to writing and especially being published, Harper, is this your first time being published, or has this happened before?
No, this is the first time.
How long did it take you to do this first one? Was it really long considering you've never done it before?
It took years, actually, 2 or 3 years.
And after those years of work, finally you open your mailbox that one day and there it is, your first copy of 'Twas in Dixie. You get to hold this thing for that first time. What was that like, Harper?
A relief that I had gotten that for, because it was a project.
And now it's official, you are a published author. When you think about that, what's the most rewarding aspect of that for you?
I hope that it will be appreciated and enjoyed by many people. It's an interesting story, and it's about slavery. It begins in 1848 and goes all the way through a generation of people through the Civil War. So it covers a lot of ground and a lot of people.
So how did the idea for this come about, Harper, especially the setting being set in the Old South during the Civil War?
Well, I am an old Southerner. I'm 86 now. I grew up in the South during the time of the Second World War and spent a good bit of time at my grandfather's plantation. And I grew up on Southern history and on patriotism and all the things that really matter in life. And I wanted to write about the people of that time. I was a teacher. I taught high school Latin, and I had a double major in history and Latin.
Wow.
I taught history, too. But because of a terrible accident, I had to leave teaching. And it was at that time that I decided to write, because the girls were grown up and gone, and the house was empty, and I was able to type. So I decided I would write.
Yeah, you have the writing of the book, but then you have the publishing of the book. So once you handed it off to the publisher and you got that started, Harper, what was the most challenging part of the publishing process for you?
Computers. I'm old and I don't do well with computers, and everything is computerized now. It was a big problem for me.
While you're writing, is writer's block ever a thing you got to deal with?
No, I had no problem with that. I wanted to write about the people, and I began. I never knew I did not sit down and plan the book out. I just started typing, and I never knew what the characters were going to do or say next, and I was often surprised by what they did.
Well, it can be quite the learning experience to do this for the first time. So do you have anything you might have picked up along the way that you could throw out as advice for the aspiring authors that are listening to us?
I would just say work on it every day, even if it's a little, just like practicing piano. You know, you have to play every day if you're going to play piano, and even if it's just a little bit, you practice every day. So I would write every day, too, a little bit or a lot.
I think readers are going to love this book and the whole series, so I encourage you to go check this out. Again, the title is 'Twas in Dixie. It's written by T. Harper Wilkinson, and it's published by Newman Springs Publishing. So you can really find it anywhere. Go over to Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes or traditional brick-and-mortar stores. You'll be able to find this. Well, Harper, it's been really nice talking with you tonight. I really appreciate you coming on the show and telling me about all this.
I appreciate your calling me.
A.J. Raino's new book will spark curiosity about identity and self-expression in readers. It's titled Lena Learns the World. And A.J. is right here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, and we get to talk all about this book. A.J., welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad to be talking with you right now, A.J., and I'm really excited to be learning about Lena Learns the World. Can you tell me about it?
Absolutely. It is a chapter book with great cover and awesome illustrations done by my husband, Chester Johnson, an extremely talented artist that has a mini animated short called Pan Wong on YouTube. It's great.
Oh, wow.
But this awesome book is about an 11-year-old who's totally fearless and curious about everything in the world. She's all about asking questions, even if sometimes people think she's a bit rude with the questions. But how else are you going to learn? So in the book, Lena is super pumped to meet her fave pop star Diamond Stone in the mall. But things get a little odd when the pop star starts talking about herself as we and us. So Lena's like, what is that about? So Lena is now on a mission to find out why, and then starts to wonder if her fave pop star is doing that. Should I be doing that too? It's a good adventure with Lena.
Now, this is a chapter book. What ages did you have in mind?
The age range is 7 and up.
So what sparked this book for you, AJ? Where did the idea come from?
Well, the book came from, being a parent. I saw my child go through similar growing pains as I did, but the world is so different when I was growing up. And kids now are exposed to even more social issues and influences at such a young age. And I've learned children aren't sure what to think. I would ask my nieces and nephews questions about their day, and they would share their experiences with me and with their friends at school. And they would mention that some of the kids, are adopting the social trends going on. And looking at my niece's face, I could tell she wasn't quite sure what to think or how to take it. So the world now is the world period is so perplexing, especially to our young ones. Mm-hmm. They have so many questions about what they're seeing, what they're hearing, but may not know how to ask it or are just hesitant to ask it. So I wanted to create a relatable friend that shares in that journey to encourage our young ones to share their voice and to let them know that your questions and your thoughts matter.
I love it. AJ, do you have experience publishing and writing, or are you new to all this?
I am fairly new. I had some poetry published in Odyssey way back when, but this is actually my first published book.
Congratulations. Did this take you forever to do since it was your first one?
It took about 2 years to complete this book.
Yeah, you have the writing of the book, and then you have the publishing of the book, and that's a whole new ball game. There's a lot involved there. What did you find the most challenging part of that publishing process?
The most challenging part was the editing part, making sure I had everything as perfectly as I possibly could get it, even though I was told, even though you're going through it, you may miss one or two things. And I thought I was being meticulous, and then I would find out I missed something. And I'm like, oh, man. So to me, that was the most challenging aspect of it, was just making sure I had everything right and everything made sense and everything was, relatable and readable so that everyone can enjoy it.
And I can only imagine what you were thinking and what you were feeling when you finally got your first copy in. And there you were, holding Lena Learns the World in your hands for that very first time. What was that like for you, AJ?
Oh, my gosh. That was so exciting to actually see my work in reality. I mean, I felt nervous, but I was also motivated to share the story of Lena and other stories to come. But I just felt so blessed and proud of what I'd accomplished.
Well, this book has a wonderful message. I encourage everybody listening to go seek it out. Again, it's titled Lena Learns the World. It's written by A.J. Raino and published by Christian Faith Publishing, so you can find it at places like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, and traditional brick-and-mortar stores. A.J., it's been really nice talking with you tonight. Thanks again for being here with me.
Thank you so much again for having me. I've appreciated it.
Morty Martin and Dancing Francis. That's the name of the new book written by Dr. Nathan Pfleger, and it's the story of a scientist and his unusual pet. I'm going to find out more about this book. The author, Nathan, is with me now. Nathan, welcome to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. I appreciate you being here with me.
Glad to be here.
Nathan, can you tell me all about Morty Martin and Dancing Francis and what readers can expect here?
Sure. The story's about this fellow named Morty Martin. He's a clever guy, but he's not academically inclined. He's good at academics, but does not think it's worth pursuing for its own sake. He was more at home in the lab with cameras, soldering irons, measuring equipments, and experimental tanks than in a classroom with equations and diagrams. He wants to feel the satisfaction of building something and making it work. He wants to touch the answer to a problem rather than write it on a blackboard and explain it to someone else. As a researcher, he finished his master's degree and told his advisor that he was not ready to go on to the next stage. He'd had enough. So his advisor offered him a job in the experimental physics lab where he would help faculty and graduate students with their experiments and measurements. And he was quite at home there. His specialty was capturing exotic particles in vacuum bottles of his own design. The exotic particles are like protons and electrons and sometimes subatomic particles. The bottles had a number of sensors and stimulus devices embedded within them. There, the researcher he supported could study the particle as long as it was contained and active. This was not often very long for some of the particles. In his job, he was occasionally offered special assignments that got him away from campus for a while. He was on assignment at CERN, which is the European Collider system, and he was helping a PhD student with her research while he discovered an unusual electron. He captured it in his magnetic bottle F. He was classifying all his bottles by letters of the alphabet A through Z. Electrons are common, and they've been studied and documented, and no one was interested in Morty's little discovery. The advantage in electrons is that they don't decay and could be held for quite a while. This one would, on occasion, change state very rapidly. So rapidly that it was hard to follow the transitions from reading the sensors. He hooked his sensors up to a speaker, and they played what sounded to Morty like a little tune. Fellow researchers told him it might be part of an entangled pair and simply reacting to whatever was happening to the other half of that pair. He decided to hold on to the electron for a while. Maybe he could find the other half of the entangled pair. He called the electron Francis. It was, after all, in his bottle marked F. The book follows the disciplined approach that Marty uses for trying to find out the message that Francis is trying to convey and understand what the world that Francis opened before his eyes. The truth was actually stranger than that of any of his colleagues had predicted. It was so profound, and it had a profound effect on Morty and all of those around him, especially the love of his life, Carice. At points in its story, this is mainly about human relations and trust, as well as science.
Nathan, what kinds of readers were you writing for?
So I've always loved science fiction, not the heavy fantasy kind, but the kind that was just over the edge from current reality. There are no ghosts or wizards in Marty's story. From my previous employment working in scientific research areas for defense and industry, I was writing all of the time. In that life, I authored 4 technical books and hundreds of technical papers. Stories like Marty's were swirling in my head, and they were just waiting to get out. After retiring, I began to give them life. Sometimes the words would flow at an incredible pace. Other times they needed to pause, and they would need to ruminate within my mind for a while. Sometimes I would have to go back and rewrite what I'd already written. This book finally came together after several iterations. I adopted the pen name Nathan Pfleger so that it was not to be confused with the fiction with my scientific writings. The book is mainly for lovers of science fiction that don't want to go push to that fantasy edge where we have all kinds of processes that are beyond the realm of possibility. Morty Martin was my first such effort that got published, and there will be several more if I can get them through the publishing process.
Well, this book sounds like it's going to be super interesting for a lot of readers. Again, it's titled Morty Martin and Dancing Francis. It's written by Dr. Nathan Pfleger and published by Newman Springs Publishing. So you can find it at Amazon or Barnes & Noble, iTunes, and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Nathan, thanks again for coming on the show and telling me all about this. I had a nice time talking with you tonight.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me.
Author Merri Jamison's new book. It's titled Ascent of Demons, an Agent Creedy novel. It's a gripping new thriller that invites readers into a dark world of vampires and magic. And I'm going to talk all about this book right now. The author, Merri, is here with me. Merri, welcome to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. It's great to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm happy to be talking with you, and I'm super interested in this book. It sounds really creative. Can you tell me all about Ascent of Demons and what readers are in for here?
Yeah, absolutely. This book is technically an urban fantasy, and it's all about like the old classic. We have got vampires, we've got shifters, we've got all the fey creatures you can possibly think of, and we even have some angels and demons sprinkled in there with a little bit of a twist from what you normally think of as their origins. So the book is kind of based in Los Angeles, and it kind of has its own character throughout the story as well. And it follows Agent Creedy, as we know, who is a supernatural detective. And she works for a place called the Department of Supernaturals and Non-Humans. And her job is basically to investigate supernatural crimes and keep them in line so they don't kind of oust their existence to the humans. And in this book specifically, she's investigating a rash of disappearances that eventually turn into murders. And her partner ends up being taken. And so at this point, she's got like no leads, nothing to go on. And so she has to turn to her ex, who happens to be the king of the vampires, for help. So it's just like a bunch of crazy characters. There's some mystery, there's some true crime, a little bit of a love triangle, all wrapped up with a sassy heroine, and I think a really fun time.
Wow, sure sounds like it. Where'd you get the idea for this?
Honestly, I've been kind of kicking around the idea for some time. I've been a huge fan of this genre my entire life. Literally anything that has a fantasy creature in it, I will read it, I will watch it, I want to be part of it. I love Los Angeles. I've lived there for 18 years, and I just always think that it's such a fun background to a story like this. And so she kind of developed over time, over, various different inspirations of things that I had read and I experienced. And I just kind of was sick of the typical, vampires come from here and demons come from there. And so I just was like, what if we turned it all on its head and it was a completely different origin story? And that's kind of where I went with it.
So would you say then fans usually of urban fantasy would be most into this?
Fans of urban fantasy for sure, but also I'm getting a lot of people who just like true crime, people who like mystery, and just people who like a strong female like heroine, don't normally even read the genre, somehow are picking up the book, which is awesome. I'm getting a lot of great feedback about just that in general, because it does have a lot of true crime, a lot of like murder mystery in it as well. So you don't have to be a fan of fantasy to like the book.
Merri, can you tell me all about your writing background prior to this?
Sure. I actually am an actor as well. And so I've written a couple of screenplays, and I don't really have a huge writing background, but, I just wanted to do it. And so I did it.
Do you think you'd do it again? This is an Agent Creedy novel, so I assume you have more in mind.
Absolutely, it's going to be a series. I wasn't sure at first, but the people have been asking for more. So everyone I talked to is like, hey, when's the second one coming out? So I have 3 planned so far with the potential of being more. And the second book is I've gotten about a third of the way done writing it. So it's already better than the first one. And I'm really excited to get them out there.
Wonderful. So this is your first book. Did this take you a really long time to write, then put through that publishing process?
The publishing process, yes. The writing, not so much. And that is because in 2022, I actually had a slew of random accidents and ended up breaking bones in both my legs.
Oh, my.
And so I couldn't really walk for about 6 months. And so the recovery time was pretty intense. And instead of sitting on the couch and being depressed about it, I finally was like, you know what, this is the perfect time to work on a book, because I literally can't do anything else. So I just put all of that like energy and frustration, and I just put it in the book. So it took me about a little over 3 months to write, and then another 3 months to, do all the applications and sending out to publishers and agents and all that fun stuff.
And I really think readers are going to love this book. Again, it's titled Ascent of Demons, an Agent Creedy novel. It's written by Merri Jamison and published by Newman Springs Publishing. So you can find it everywhere. Go on over to Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes or traditional brick-and-mortar stores, and you'll be able to pick this up. Well, Merri, it's been great talking with you tonight. Thanks so much for telling me all about this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. It was amazing.
The Chudderdudders. Boji Learns a Valuable Lesson. It's the name of the new book, written by Christopher J. Heacox, and it takes readers on a delightful journey. We're going to talk all about this right now. Christopher, the author, is here with me at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. Christopher, welcome to the show. I appreciate you being here.
Hi, thanks a lot, Corey. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. I'm really curious about the Chudderdudders, Christopher. Can you tell me about it?
So, there are two friends, best friends, Boji and Widge, and they set out on an adventure, and in the process, they run into some antagonists and protagonists, and they come across, an amulet, I guess you could say, that brings out the best in people, or worst in people, as it were. And there are a lot of different characters. There's freeps and muffle-ups and giants. So basically, that's kind of it in a nutshell. Boji and Widge are called Wibbits, and they live in a town called Murgatville. And like I said, they're Wibbits, and they're hedgehog-type critters that walk around on 2 feet and get into all sorts of trouble.
Man, this sounds like a lot of fun, Christopher, and a lot of creativity, the Chudderdudders and everything. How did the idea come about for this?
Well, I actually started this in 1995.
Oh, wow.
In our backyard, we had a shed, and under that shed lived a very large woodchuck, and it would come out to feed every now and then. And when it did, I would pick up my 2-year-old son, Ben, who is now 31, and we'd watch him out the kitchen window and kind of bombing all around and feeding and whatnot. And Ben would get all excited, being a 2-year-old, and he would say, "Oh, gee, oh, gee." So we called him OG the woodchuck. From that, I just kind of incorporated a lot of things, in my childhood growing up, and just kind of in my head, very slowly pieced together a story. And that's how it all came about, inspired by a big woodchuck.
I love it. What sorts of readers did you write this for?
I was kind of thinking 4 to 10. In selling copies of the book, I've come across a lot of kind of grandparents who have even 12-year-olds who really liked it. So I guess probably 4 to 12, somewhere in there. Again, there's a lot of different type characters that I think they enjoy reading about. Yeah, that's probably the target, 4 to 12.
So what does your writing background look like, Christopher? Have you done much of this before?
No. Again, this whole thing came about from a woodchuck. I didn't really, I don't really think I'm an author. I'm just someone who wrote a book, to be honest. So that's, I haven't done anything. I do have a couple ideas for sequels, so we'll see how that pans out.
Well, being as this was your first one, did this take you a really long time to write, get illustrated, put through that publishing process?
The writing, actually, what I did is I just had a lot of ideas, and I wrote down the ideas, and it was like a puzzle, and it just kind of fit the pieces together to form a story. So it came about pretty quickly, the written process. What took forever was trying to get it published, and I just kept, hitting roadblock after roadblock. We run an independent pharmacy here in Sharon, which is kind of close to New York City, and a lot of people in the industry would come in, and I'd pick their brains, and they were extremely, extremely helpful. But again, just roadblock after roadblock. And there were probably stretches, 5-6 years where it just kind of sat in the drawer. Not that I forgot about it, but nothing was really coming of it until a little more than a year and a half ago. I came across Covenant Books and submitted the manuscript, and they accepted it, and they were phenomenal to work with. So it took, 29 years basically from start to finish to complete the project.
I think readers are going to love this book. Again, it's titled The Chudderdudders. Boji Learns a Valuable Lesson. It's written by Christopher J. Heacox and published by Covenant Books, so you can find it everywhere: Amazon, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Christopher, it's been really nice talking with you, learning all about the Chudderdudders. Thanks again for being here.
Hey, thank you very much, Corey. I greatly appreciate it.
Author Jennifer Fichter-Tulipano's book, Reading Through My Bible, Year 1 Pandemic Prayers, offers readers a helpful resource for spiritual rejuvenation. The audiobook edition just came out, and we're going to be talking all about it here at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. The author, Jennifer, is sitting here with me. Jennifer, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
The pleasure is all mine. I'm really curious about reading through my Bible. So, Jennifer, can you tell me what readers and audiobook listeners are going to find?
So this is actually a documenting of my experience in reading through the Bible for a year during the pandemic, during the lockdown.
And what sparked this for you?
So I started, reading a lot during the pandemic. Then I shortly after got invited to a Bible study. The fellowship teacher sent me the Daily Walk Bible, and that just prompted me to, set out on a mission. I'm going to start reading every day for a year. I started writing, taking notes as I read. That turned into a blog, and blog turned into a book.
Were you thinking about certain readers when you were writing?
Actually, no. I was just writing to kind of, make sense of what I was learning and then just share my experience with anybody else who was out there, dusting off their Bibles, turning back to God in prayer, really open to anybody who was looking for God during that time or even, is still looking for him today. I tried to, even though the posts were, dated in 2020, the message is still relevant even today.
And once you got started on it, how long of a journey was this for you, the publishing and everything?
So from start to finish, about 3 years. The blog was written, I would post once a month during the pandemic. And then a few months after, a friend said, you really should turn this into a book. I enjoy getting, your monthly posts, but you should kind of keep on writing and add a little bit more. And so she kind of prompted me to get that going. And then once I reached out to the publisher, that took about 2 years' time from start to finish.
Now, before this, are you experienced in writing and publishing?
Actually, no. I'm a teacher by trade. I've been in the classroom for about 20 years. So aside from, writing assignments or, just writing for my students, this is my first published work.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And of course, we're talking about the audiobook edition of Reading Through My Bible. So what was it like hearing your own book read to you? You've been reading it off the page that whole time, and now someone's reading it to you, Jennifer. What's that like?
It was amazing. I almost I couldn't believe that was really happening. Listening. Editing is different. You listen to it in little pieces and you edit things here and there. But once it was ready, listening to it from start to finish, I was like, wow, God, you really helped me make that happen. So it was amazing.
And now that you're officially a published author, when you think about that, what's the most rewarding aspect of it for you?
I think the most rewarding aspect is sharing it with other people, really putting it out there. Prior to that, it was kind of just in my journals and just, in my computer. And now it's really being put out there to share with others. And I think that in itself is a reward. Seeing my kids reading it or listening to it with me, that's definitely the most rewarding.
New authors can often be surprised at the publishing process, how much is involved in there, what you all have to do. When it came to the publishing end of things, Jennifer, what did you find the most challenging for you?
Definitely editing. I had a really difficult time. It was such a critical period, looking for any mistakes or errors or, trying to rephrase sentences just so that they sound better. At some point, seeing all of the mistakes, it's like, should I really still be doing this? It just feels like it's all wrong. But, ultimately, when it all came together, it was worth it. Definitely.
What are the chances we might see another book from you here in the future?
Very high chances. I actually have decided to turn this into a series. So I have years 2 and 3 written, and I'm right now personally editing them before submitting those manuscripts and working on another book as well. So definitely will see more from me.
Well, this sounds like a book and an audiobook that I think readers and listeners are really going to be blessed by. Again, it's titled Reading Through My Bible, Year 1 Pandemic Prayers. This is written by Jennifer Fichter-Tulipano and is published by the Audiobook Network, so you can find it really anywhere that you normally would go to get your audiobooks, like Audible, iTunes, and Amazon. Jennifer, it's been really fantastic talking with you tonight. Thanks again for coming on the show.
No, my pleasure. It's been wonderful talking with you. Thank you so much for having me.
The book I'm looking at right now is a gripping apocalyptic thriller. It's titled Tribulation. It's written by Rodney L. Bron, and that's what we'll be talking about right now here at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. I have Rodney right here with me. Rodney, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm really interested in tribulation and learning all about this, Rodney. Can you tell me about it?
It's actually about the tribulation period in the book of Revelation in the Bible. What I did with it, I took it and made it in a more modern form so that people could really understand it better. It's not a teaching guide, but once the readers get a hold of it and read it, they'll go deep into it.
What kinds of readers did you have in mind for this?
It actually reaches everybody in every genre because if you like drama, it has drama in it. If you need inspiration, it inspires you as well. And it's kind of dark as well, and it's a thriller, it's chilling. It has everything for all genres of readers.
So how did the idea for this come about, Rodney? What sparked you to start writing it?
I was reading the book of Revelation one day, and it came across to me to write it. But actually, in that note, I wrote it in the beginning as a stage play. And as I wrote it as a stage play, I didn't have the funds to actually do the play itself. So I was sitting one day in my living room, just looking at it, pondering what I'm going to do with it. And my wife actually came and sat down beside me and asked me what I was doing. And I told her, I said, well, I'm pondering what to do with this screenplay that I have written. She said, why don't you turn it into a book? And that's how I began to write the actual book of it.
So is this your first time at that kind of thing, writing and publishing, or do you have a history of this?
No, this is my first time publishing a book. First time I authored a book, but I wrote little plays and stuff that we used to do in Chicago. I used to help write some plays and stuff, but this was my first time authoring a book. And the thing about this is that when I did author this book, and Christian Faith Publishing, they accepted it, and when they took it and sent it back to me, I thought it was going to be in book format, but it wasn't in book format. And they told me, well, I had to be the one to put it in book format. So that was a challenge to me as well because I was used to writing plays and stuff, and this was the first time that I had to change the format into a book.
And then once you got that first copy of Tribulation in, you finally got to hold this thing in your hands, Rodney. What kind of a moment was that like for you?
That was very, very exciting to me to actually see something that I dreamed of to become accomplished in my life because so many times we want to do things, but fear inside of ourselves of not thinking it's going to be good enough or if it's going to reach people. To me, it was just like, well, I did it. I'm so happy that I did do it. So I just want to tell people to follow your dreams and never think that you're not good enough to do something. Just go out there and do it. Do what your heart desires and what you love to do, just do it. Because I never thought I would have authored a book.
And now when you think to yourself, hey, I'm a published author, what's the most rewarding thing about that for you?
A feel of accomplishment and a feel of relief that is done because of the process that you have to go through to get it done. It's not real grueling or anything, but it's just a lot of writing. Especially this kind of book, you have to make sure you keep it in line with the biblical context as well as making it appeal to other people. So I couldn't really believe it. I was like numb when I saw it come. I'm like, wow, really? I did this?
What are the chances we'll see another book from you in the future?
Oh, it's a very good chance because I'm actually starting the process of working on another one. Because after the people read this one, they'll see that it's going to be a continuance to this story.
Well, this sounds like a really exciting book that readers are going to really love. Again, the title is Tribulation. It's written by Rodney L. Bron, published by Christian Faith Publishing. It's available everywhere, so go on over to Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes, also traditional brick-and-mortar stores, and you'll find this. Rodney, it's been great talking with you tonight. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, and it was great talking to you as well.
We hope you enjoyed this edition of the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. We hope to see you back here every Friday night at 8 p.m. or listen anytime via podcast at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, to name just a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first.